to climb, rivers to see. Magic's here for you and me as we travel the roads to romance.
Sun and sand, sagebrush and tumbleweed, rolling mountains and giant cactus. This is the old Santa Cruz Trail, running from Santa Cruz in Old Mexico to Tucson. Here the Tumacacori National Monument stands, preserving the ruins of Tumacacori Mission. Another mission, San Javier del Bac, stands on a slight hill facing south across the Santa Cruz Valley. Work on this magnificent shrine was started in the early 1700s. Not far from busy Tucson, an exact replica of old Tucson has been built as a motion picture location. Children of the Carrillo School in Tucson re-emphasize that the Santa Cruz Valley is the blending place of many cultures. This is a Mexican Christmas festival. When the pageantry of the festival is done, there is candy for all who scramble for it. You and your family can enjoy the vacation thrills of this spot, and no matter where you live, you can reach it quickly, comfortably, and with utmost economy. Travel this year the roads to romance, to places you have always wanted to go. And when you travel, go in one of the quality motor cars your Chevrolet dealer has to offer. It will be your magic carpet that will carry you to the land of your heart's desire.
Hello, my name is Hannah Barrett. I am the Senior Program Assistant for the AARP Arizona State Office. Welcome to today's Arizona Hip Historian Virtual Happy Hour Tour. AARP is the nation's largest nonprofit, nonpartisan organization dedicated to empowering people 50 and older to choose how they live as they age. With a nationwide presence and nearly 38 million members nationwide, as well as nearly 900,000 in Arizona, AARP strengthens communities and advocates for what matters most for families. In the month of March, we will focus on savings and planning by providing specific tools and information about managing savings and debt, as well as planning for retirement. The coronavirus pandemic, high unemployment rate, and economic challenges have made this information all the more important. Visit us at www.moneymap.aarp.org for resources and information, and visit www.aarp.org/nearme to see virtual events near you. Now I'll turn it over to Marshall Shore.
Folks, welcome to the show. Get ready to meet your host for the night, Arizona's very own hip historian himself, Marshall Shore.
Well, hello, everybody, and happy March 11th. Oh, my gosh. Can you believe it's already the second week of March? And we've got some fun stuff coming up for you in just a moment. So I want to welcome all of you to Arizona History Happy Hour. So this is our 10th show of our second season. And so I know some of you are watching on Facebook, on YouTube, and some of you might even be watching on Twitch. Now, today we just celebrated a few days ago International Women's Day. It is also National Popcorn Lovers Day. So, when we're done, you might want to go grab some Jiffy Pop or some Orville Redenbacher, throw that in the microwave or on your stove. Don't reverse the two because aluminum and microwaves don't really mix that well. It is also National Proofreading Day, and some of you, I don't think we have any glitches today, but some of you might actually be able to be like, oh, wait a minute, you misspelled something. It is also the 80th anniversary of Wonder Woman. That cartoon first came out 80 years ago. And of course, our very own Wonder Woman, Linda Carter, from right here in Arizona. So what could be a better day to be talking about some amazing history? So what can you expect? Of course, there's going to be some history. We're going to do a little bit of music history. We always do a little bit of Arizona. Of course, we have a cocktail. There's going to be some trivia. And, we have a very special guest coming up in just a few minutes, as well as show and tell, because as you can see from behind me, I have a house full of stuff. So it's a chance for me to pull something off. I guess I should probably say blow the dust off. Sometimes I have to take and wipe it off, but we won't go down that path because, yeah, we're not just going to go down there. So if this is your first time watching, you might wonder, who is that man and why is he on my screen? Well, my name is Marshall Shore. And I got here a little over 21 years ago. I was working in Brooklyn in a lovely Carnegie library. And, there was snow on the ground. There was a wind whipping through. And I was like, I am ready for some change. So I decided that it was time to load everything up and make a move. And I traded that library for a library in South Phoenix, which was the Harmon Library. I also worked at another library that we might talk about later on, Ocotillo, but we'll get there. Now Harmon, that 1950 building no longer stands. It's now a fancy new building by Richard and Bauer, and it's a beautiful space. So if you get a chance, libraries, I hear rumors that they might be opening soon. So, well, soon. And that kind of, that government quotation mark kind of way. And to get here, I had to load everything up into a big orange cube, a U-Haul. And their international world headquarters are right here in the Valley of the Sun, and they've been helping so many people move across the country. Now, when I got here, we promptly moved into a lovely 1956 ranch house. Now, it was multiple tones of beige, and I am so happy to say now that is a lovely just two-tone of seafoam and cantaloupe. Now, my kitchen, the house is pretty much a time capsule, and we try to keep it to period as much as we can. I mean, there is what my kitchen looks like today. All that mahogany veneered cabinets, the original handles, all that buttercream yellow tile, that's all original, including that brand new 1956 GE electric oven with the matching stovetop and the push buttons inset in the wall. Now, as soon as I got here, all I heard were people saying, there's no history here. But I quickly discovered as I started having adventures, whether it was on foot, on bike, or in a car, I was coming face to face with so many amazing stories, people, and places that I started doing this. And then there's that post-war boom that I think in so many ways made the Arizona that we all know and love today. All those GIs that either were stationed here, trained here, or passed on their way to somewhere else. And after the war, they were moving here in huge numbers, looking for a whole new way of life, which they found. Now, I'm also known as the hip historian. You might wonder, how does one get a name like the hip historian? Well, you might remember every February 14th, we have a celebration for Arizona and statehood. And back in 2012, we did things across the state. We did it up right. And so someone gave me 15 minutes on the main stage in front of the Capitol to talk about anything I wanted to. And I chose to talk about one of the most favorite events that was called Mask of the Yola Moon. Now, I was lucky enough to find 3 dresses from the late 30s that were worn in that event. And so I was able to convince 3 amazing friends to don those dresses, wander around on stage as we played music and we talked about the Mask of the Yola Moon and kind of its history. And, you know, I was doing a variety of tours and lectures until about a year ago when all that came to a screeching halt. Now, we have been doing a few walking tours where we do a second Saturday tour where everyone is fully masked. My co-host Deb and I, we actually wear microphones under our masks and we don't go into any buildings. So it's all extremely safe. Now, if you want to reach out, you'll notice that there is indeed, for some of you, there is a chat session going on. So feel free to make little notes in there. As well as you can reach out to me through good old-fashioned Facebook, the newfangled Instagram, or even email. So, and oh my gosh, someone sent me an email the other day, and it may wind up being a whole show onto itself, but more about that later. I will ask, if you're watching on Facebook, you'll notice there is a little share button. If you would be so kind and click on that button so all your friends can see the amazing fun that we're having with Arizona history. Because who would have thunk it? So many great stories. And so, show and tell. So today we're going to talk about, actually just down the street from me, is the Phoenix College with their mascot of the Bears. And so this is 1929 Bear Tracks, which was kind of their yearbook. And at that point, it was Phoenix Junior College right here in Phoenix, Arizona. And I love I'm such a sucker for ephemera like this. I mean, just look at some of the good old-fashioned graphics and the layout and everything else. And actually, they're going to be a guest coming up in April, and because they are celebrating their 100th anniversary. Now, you know, it would not be a happy hour without a cocktail. And I am lucky enough to be working with the amazing PJ Vader Barron over at the Hotel Valley Ho. And every week he comes with a brand new cocktail. And this is oh my gosh. And so this one, I don't necessarily want, I guess I can tell you a little bit about it. It actually would give away one of the answers, but it's called Overlook, for a historic hotel. And the person who designed that historic hotel basically brought together a variety of architecture styles. And so that's why we have things like the maize liqueur in it. There's a little bit of that manzanilla for just those little elements that she would bring into those buildings. And then, of course, that mission style. Oh, I may have already given away an answer. I'm not quite sure, but anyway, so what PJ does is really cool. Oh, there we go. So there we have my little silent bartender. Oh, and he's looking rather laid back today. So, what PJ does is really cool. So he makes the cocktails to go. So this is called Overlook, and it even has all the ingredients written there on the back of it. so that way you could make them at home. And so he puts all of the ingredients in there. So all I have to do is this. Some days it's a little more complicated because he makes me do different tasks, which some days I'm good at, some days they've seen better days. So there is indeed the Overlook cocktail. So cheers, everyone. And and it's so funny because this is so tasty that I normally, when I went to go test it, I drank the whole thing before I even remember to take a photo. So the photo that we have of it is actually pretty much an empty glass. Because it's so cheers, everybody. Whatever you're drinking, from water to whatever else, just enjoy it. Now, through the miracle of technology, no matter how old or how new, I am so excited to bring on a very special guest, my friend Taz. So let's see if indeed I can get technology to join. Oh, and there we go. Well, hello.
Hello. Nice to be here.
I am so happy you were here. Thank you so much for joining us tonight.
It's my pleasure. Thanks for asking me. This is wonderful.
As we get a little chance to just kind of chat about some architecture across Arizona, maybe by some names people might not be familiar with. Some other folks might be familiar with those names, but that's part of the fun.
Yeah.
So Taz, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, I have been living in Arizona, probably it's been, since like 1993. What is that? How many years is that? 30 years? I don't know. I can't do the math right now, but
so almost 30 years. Wow.
Almost 30 years. I went to high school here in Mesa, and I basically lived in Mesa with my parents. And I went to Dobson High School, and I went to Arizona State University for architecture school, both for my undergrad and my grad. I did move away from Phoenix to work in Pittsburgh for a year. And then I came back to Phoenix. Always pulls me back. And which I love. It is my home. I'm Indian, and I'm an Indian American, and I was born in Africa, in Mozambique. So my family immigrated here to the States in 1984, and we lived in Indiana for a long time, and then we came to Arizona in 1983. So I have been here for a long time. I actually moved to Portland in 2013. And then I moved to San Francisco for a few years, and I'm back in Phoenix. I've been here about 2 years now, over 2 years, and it really feels like home. Having been other places, I feel very much at home here. And I worked in a historic architecture firm for a couple of years, and I learned a lot about Arizona history, which I love, and I learned a lot about Arizona historical architecture, even sort of in the pioneer days of like Charles Hayden, way back in the 1800s, when people used Adobe and things like that. So,
right.
By the way, I do not mean to give away any answers in my introduction here.
It'll just be were people listening, because I think I did the same thing. So I'm kind of like, people may not be listening to us. They're busy doing other things, waiting for the trivia.
I see. Yeah, and if they are listening with such attentiveness, they deserve to.
I completely agree.
Right?
So, yes.
So I don't feel so bad. So so I'm here now, and I have my own firm now. I have my own architecture firm, and I'm loving it so much. I live in Central Phoenix, not too far away from Marshall, I don't think. I live in the Avalon historic neighborhood.
Mm-hmm.
Do you know what that is? Okay.
Yep, not too far at all.
Yeah. So that's a little bit about me.
Nice.
Mm-hmm.
And I know, and I mean, it's like, and I think we just kind of met years ago, just kind of as downtown creatives, long before there was all this boom going on that's happening now, before ASU even came in downtown, back when there were all these different groups, just having these little social meetups at the few places that were downtown. And so now it's so crazy that there's so much going on downtown.
It's so wonderful. I love it. I love all the vibrancy. It's just amazing what has happened. And like, I know when you and I met, I felt like there were only like a handful of places that we would all go to, you know, that were kind of cool and hip and all, you know, like all of us downtown folks would hang out. And I feel like now there's just a ton of places and they keep opening. And it's just all of the downtown neighborhoods are so wonderful.
Yeah. And I mean, and I love how it's even getting, it's not just downtown Phoenix, but I mean, you've got Mesa doing some amazing things. You got so many places that are really stepping up their game. And I mean, Goodyear. I mean, there's so much cool stuff happening across the Valley and Arizona.
Absolutely. Like, look at downtown Gilbert. It's the place to be. Right. You know, I mean, and when you and I first met, I would never have thought that, oh, I'm gonna go to Gilbert for like a night out.
Exactly.
But now they have the coolest restaurants, the coolest like spaces and bars, and it's a very vibrant, walkable place. You know, I mean, it's great. Yeah. So a lot of good stuff has been happening in the Valley. You're right. Mm-hmm.
Indeed. So we always do trivia, and so Taz has created some amazing questions that kind of talk a little bit all over Arizona. It's focusing on architecture, and so now when we do trivia here on Arizona History Happy Hour, it's a little different than most trivias you're used to, because we actually we go through the questions and the multiple choice answers. So even if you don't know the answer, all you got to do is take a guess and you will get one. I mean, and you can have a very good chance of getting it right. Mm-hmm. As well as once we're done with our questions, we'll take a little bit of an Arizona music history break, and then we'll come back and we'll talk about those answers and explain some of the answers. So even if you didn't know the answer when you started watching, by the end of tonight, you will know a little bit more about Arizona architecture. Mm-hmm. Or maybe just hear about some old friends, some of those buildings that you've gone by many times and just wondered what it was. Or maybe you already knew what it was. So, all right. So now sometimes people keep track of their answers in the chat session. You can do it if you have a pen and paper handy. You can do it however you would like. So, all right. So let's go ahead and get started with our first question. All right. So who was Tucson's first female architect? Was it A, Mary Colter, B, Anne Rysdale, or C, Judith Chaffee? So one of those women was Tucson's first female architect. Who was it? All right. Question 2. Which mid-century modern architect said, in order to properly design Arizona buildings, you have to live here year-round and adapt to the elements? Was that A, Ralph Haver, B, Mary Colter, or C, Benny Gonzalez? So which one of those architects said that in order to really design buildings, you really had to understand our weather, our seasons, or lack thereof seasons? So who said that? Question 3. Who is the architect who renovated the Hayden House, which was previously Monte's La Casa Vieja, but the architect renovated it back in the 1920s? Was it A, Mary Colter, B, Robert T. Evans, or C, James Miller Crichton? Which one of those architects was brought on to renovate the Hayden House, which then became an iconic restaurant? All right. What is the Spanish word derived from the Arabic for sun-dried brick? Was it A, adobo, B, adobe, C, yadro? One of those makes me hungry. I won't tell you which one. We'll save that for later. All right. So question 5, we're at that halfway point. What year was Taliesin West built? Was it A, 1932, B, 1937, or C, 1941? All right. So coming down the hill now, question 6. Who designed the Bright Angel Lodge on the south rim of the Grand Canyon? Was it A, Mary Colter, B, William Colter, or C, Robert T. Evans? Which one of those folks designed that iconic lodge on the rim of the Grand Canyon? How tall are the doorways at Montezuma Castle? And that's question 7. So the options we have are, is it A, 6 foot 8 inches, B, 5 foot, or C, 6 feet? How tall are the doorways at Montezuma's Castle? Question 8. Who was the first Chinese American architect in Arizona? John Sing Tang, A, or was it B, Di Hong Toi, or C, Ying Pang? Who was the first Chinese American architect in Arizona? And if you don't know the answer, all you got to do is just pick one. All right, question 9. We're almost at the finish line. Who was the architect of the first Christian church here in Phoenix? Was that A, Mary Colter, B, Ralph Haver, or C, Frank Lloyd Wright? Who was the architect of the first Christian church? Just up on 7th Avenue. All right. And our final question, question 10. In 1965, Willa J. Blah proclaimed in his Concrete Products magazine that Phoenix is the blank capital of America. Was that A, block, B, concrete panels, or C, Adobe? What was Phoenix the capital of America? All right. So while you're going through, maybe you want to change some of your answers. Maybe you realize Taz and I both gave answers away, and you're going back and correcting those because you realized, because you were listening really closely, what happened. Well, while you're doing that, we're going to take a little bit of an Arizona music break. Now, I normally I'm not able to play music unless I can get the artist okay, which did not happen today, but oh my gosh, just you wait. Johnny Western. So Johnny Western grew up in Minnesota, and he went to go see a Gene Autry movie. He became his idol, and he told his parents, when I grow up, I want to be a cowboy, sing and play guitar, and ride horses, just like in the movies. So what did he do? He moved to Hollywood, and he indeed was trying to break into movies when a friend asked him to sing for a group, and that actually led to a job in Autry's band. And that launched his career. He even played for Johnny Cash, as well as appeared in 5 feature films, 32 Western TV episodes. And after he appeared in the series Have Gun Will Travel, he wrote The Ballad of Paladin. And that wound up becoming the theme for that show. He then was looking for a change out of Hollywood, wound up moving to Scottsdale, became good friends with Marty Robbins and Waylon Jennings. He did, in his career, recorded 7 albums through his career. He played guitar on 71 Johnny Cash singles, as well as 5 of his albums. Now, Johnny Western is the only country music performer who has played Carnegie Hall 3 times, the Hollywood Bowl 2 times, and has been inducted into 10 Hall of Fames across the country. And in the mid-2000s, he, with Rex Allen Jr. and the Prairie Rose Wranglers, became the first country western performers allowed to play on the Great Wall of China. I think that's pretty much an amazing career. So, all right. So who is ready for some answers? All right. So who was Tucson's first female architect? B. Ann Rysdale.
That's right. She was licensed in 1949 and she practiced in the 50s. So she was really the first and one of the only practicing women architects in the 50s. So, and you can imagine back then, the 50s were pretty not a great time for women in careers. And so it was a heavily male-dominated profession, and she really is a pioneer, and she opened the doors for future women architects here in the Southwest. So she's a real hero for us, especially on Women's History Month.
Exactly. And I love the fact that she designed, I think, some of the most iconic buildings. I mean, Shelter Bar, as well as the Tucson Inn, to name just 2 of the buildings.
Yeah.
So, I mean, and I like how Pam said, Shelter is a great dive bar, and indeed it is a great dive bar. I mean, and that Tucson Inn, that building has become such an icon. It winds up in so many books, magazines, because it's such a beautiful building that she designed.
Right. Yeah, it's gorgeous. And look at that sign. It's amazing.
Indeed it is. And I love that. I mean, Tucson has been leading the pack in that whole neon preservation, but that's a whole other conversation, a whole other show.
Yes.
All right. So on to question 2. Which mid-century architect said in order to properly design Arizona buildings, you have to live here year-round and adapt to the elements? And it was C. Benny Gonzalez.
That's right. And I don't know if anybody knows who he was taking a dig at when he said that. He was making a dig at somebody. Marshall, can you guess?
I would guess Frank Lloyd Wright.
You guessed correctly. He's making
because he had 2 homes. One was here and one was back in cold weather. So
exactly. And I'm sure Benny Gonzalez, really looked up to Frank Lloyd Wright, but he was in Arizona. Benny Gonzalez was an Arizonan through and through. So he really did believe. And when I read that, it made sense to me that you have to live through the summers here to really understand the climate and to design for that climate. So Frank Lloyd Wright, he ran back home to Wisconsin for those more mild summers. So he didn't really know what it was like here. Right. So I just thought that was funny that Benny said that. And it was sort of a sideways dig.
Yeah, no, and I mean, it's like, and I love how so many of his buildings you can still find. I mean, if you go to the Heard Museum, if you go to Scottsdale, the City Hall, He's designed churches all over.
Mhm.
Did libraries all over. In fact, actually, that was one of the libraries I worked in, Ocotillo. So he had designed that building, and it was full of his tile
Mhm.
and everything. And
Very
so,
cool.
yeah. So, I mean, it was so much fun to be able to work in a building that had been designed. And the beauty of that building was it was intended to look like a kiva. So there were no sharp corners. It's like
Mhm.
all the corners were rounded.
Oh, neat.
Yeah. So it was a very interesting building to work in, as well as trying to get furniture to fit in.
I bet that was a challenge. Yeah, and I read that Benny Gonzalez's father, I think he owned an Adobe factory. They made Adobe bricks. So I thought that was really interesting because I'm sure that influenced the way that Benny Gonzalez designed things and understood materials. It's a very sort of Arizona and desert material. So
yeah, I mean, he also did, I know for Phoenix Public, the Acacia Library, which is still standing as well. I think he did one in Nogales, and then he did a variety of churches, Paradise Valley. This is the Catholic church he designed down in Tucson. So
yeah, he's a very prominent Arizona architect.
Indeed. All right. And who was the architect that renovated Hayden House back in the 1920s? And it was Robert T. Evans.
That's right. He was, so the house was originally built by Charles Hayden, who is the founder of Tempe. He is the proprietor of Hayden's Flour Mill that we know that sits on Mill Avenue. He really is the pioneer that began Tempe, and I think he picked that spot because it was in the confluence of the river, and there was the butte, and it was a place he went up that butte, and he saw out into the river, and he's like, oh, I could put my flour mill here, and so that was a auspicious occasion, and he ended up founding Tempe. There were already Mexican settlers there, but he bought rights to the water and he settled it, and other white settlers came and things like that. So and he built that house there, which really later became Monty's La Casa Vieja steakhouse.
Right.
But if you think about how cool it is that that building still stands today and is one of the original buildings of Arizona, like the settlement of Arizona. Isn't that amazing?
Yeah.
And that people could go there. It was a public building for so long, being a restaurant and everything. So I was lucky enough to work on this building to make it.
Oh, wow. I didn't realize I actually got to work on that. Oh, very cool.
It was super cool, Marshall. I worked on it when I was working with Motley Design Group, and we were able to take it from when it was Monty's. Monty had done a lot of changes to it that weren't necessarily accurate to the history, and he made it into a restaurant. Nothing wrong with it. He did what he had to do to make it a restaurant. So we peeled back a lot of those layers that Monty had put on to make it go back to Robert T. Evans's 1929 version of the building. So Robert T. Evans came in there in 1929 after Charles Hayden had passed away, and it was owned by his two daughters, and they were going to make it into an inn. And so he came and he renovated the building to make it sort of into a restaurant and an inn. And that's the era that we tried to restore the building to. And today it is offices. It's not open to the public, unfortunately, but in the future they are trying to plan to make it a museum when they have enough funding.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, but it's owned by the city. It's completely protected.
Oh, I didn't realize the city now owned it. Oh, that's actually really cool.
It's really cool, and it's like safe.
Yeah.
Nothing can happen to it. Isn't that nice?
That's amazing.
Yep. So it's good news for that building.
Yeah, I mean, and Robert T. Evans, his kind of main thing was Adobe.
Yes, exactly. Exactly. He was an architect. He was a master architect with Adobe. It was really a big, yeah. And he did the, what are they called?
The Jokaki Inn.
The middle picture you have, what is that called?
The Jokaki Inn.
The Jokaki Inn, yeah, he did that building. And he was like a master Adobe person. And, you know, the Hayden House was originally built in Adobe.
Right.
And so Robert T. Evans came in and, you know, renovated it with Adobe. And today, you know, when we were renovating the building, we got like a master Adobe builder. His name is Reggie. And he, because there's not a lot of experts in Adobe these days. You know what I'm saying?
I would believe that.
It's an older, historic, it's a wonderful material. I don't know why we don't use it more, but it's very, you know, it's of the desert. It's made out of dirt, of our own dirt of the desert. So it's a wonderful, like, indigenous, sustainable, durable material. So, but we don't use it very much anymore.
Right, and also the walls are so thick that's a really good insulator as well.
It is. It's such a great desert material. It's used all over the world. It's just called different things. Like it's used by the Arabs in the deserts of the Middle East. It's used here in the deserts of the Southwest. It's used pretty much in every desert where you can find it. You know, they make sun-dried bricks, which I think is like our next question.
I know it's coming up, but he also did one of my favorite buildings, which is the Eisendrath House, which is out in Tempe. And so again, it was basically Saguaro Foundation redid the building. And I don't know, I mean, I know it's like now with COVID, I think it's shut, but hopefully soon to be open for tours again. And again, it's a 1930s Adobe mansion that has its own fascinating story with just Robert T. Evans kind of story overlaid onto it as well. So
yeah, he was another master architect that is maybe not as well known because he's not from the mid-century modern era. He's from before, like the 30s and 40s. So I mean, to be honest, I didn't know about him until I started working on the Hayden House, and then I found out about how prominent he is, and he's done a lot of our most important buildings in the city. So yeah, he's very important to our state.
Indeed. And so question 4, the Spanish word derived from the Arabic word for sun-dried brick, Adobe.
Well, you can probably tell I'm a little bit obsessed with Adobe. I'll freely admit I'm obsessed with Adobe. It's such a cool material. It's very indigenous to our states, in our desert, in our climate. I'm just a huge fan, and I love to find any buildings that are made of Adobe because they're just rare these days, you know. But they really stand up to time.
Like the Sandy O'Connor House, which is now over on the Arizona Heritage Square, on the Arizona Heritage Center, they were actually able to cut the Adobe house up and move it.
That's amazing. I didn't know that, Marshall. I didn't know they moved it.
Yeah, so now you can go there. It's a different organization that has it, but some people, they've rented it out for weddings, for different events. I know there were some groups that were having kind of think tanks in there. So being in just a space where she spent so much of her time.
Yeah, that's real.
Yeah. And that was, it's a great mid-century Adobe.
Yeah. Isn't that interesting? Yeah. And it's just, Adobe has sort of fallen out of fashion. And I know that a lot of like more contemporary modern architects, they use things like rammed earth, which is also super cool. But sort of it's the same principle where you're using earth it's an earthen building, just like Adobe. But Adobe is just bricks, it's masonry. So, and it's an ancient material that has been used prehistorically. So I just think it's super cool, and that we still have Adobe buildings, you know, in our midst.
Right. And I love that Pam actually looked, and you can actually book tours for the Eisendrath House on Thursdays and Saturdays. So it's well worth going to take a look at.
Mm-hmm. Agree.
And then Anita thinks the Kerr Cultural Center might also be Adobe.
Oh, is that right? I didn't know that.
I didn't know that either.
I'll have to check that out. Thanks for
I know
saying.
that exactly. I'm like, okay, things to do.
Yeah, exactly.
That's part of the fun of happy hour, is just everyone's always learning.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So what year was Taliesin West built for our probably most famous snowbird?
That's right.
And it was 1937.
That's right. I'm really glad you included this photograph because, talking about earthen buildings, Frank Lloyd Wright just invented his own earthen building, which was taking rocks from the actual mountain that he was near and from the actual area he was in, and using that with sort of like the mud around him to hold them together to build the material with which he built these beautiful, gorgeous buildings. So I think it's a really neat reinterpretation of earthen buildings, that we've been talking about. So I just think that's super cool. In 1937, I just thought that was neat that it just seems like a long time ago that Frank Lloyd Wright was here. But he's had such a huge influence on the Valley.
Right.
Yeah, it's very interesting. I don't know. To me, he's just like such a big part of the fabric of our the Valley.
Right. But what I love is he was not the only architect here. I mean, there are lots of architects doing a variety of things. And so that's why I love that we're getting a chance to highlight some of those lesser known architects that were also doing some amazing work.
Absolutely. And I love that Benny Gonzalez, even though he revered Frank Lloyd Wright, also was like, well, he had some differing opinions from him too. So you're right, Marshall, Frank Lloyd Wright gets a ton of attention and other people don't. But I think Arizona is such a hub for very innovative architecture throughout our history.
Right. But so it's the Benny question. It's but a lot of some of those classic, even mid-century buildings really took the elements here in Arizona into consideration. I mean, with even Adobe or with Haver having those little shotgun windows, so it would allow light in, but not a lot of heat because of the glass. So
exactly. I feel like you really do have to take the climate here into consideration because it's so different than anywhere else. So if you're a trained architect from the Midwest or the East Coast, you just have to relearn everything. It's opposite here. You want to keep the sun out instead of bringing it in like you would in, let's say, the East Coast.
Right, where you really want that heat to come in because
it's cold.
It's cold, exactly.
Yeah.
All right. So who designed the Bright Angel Lodge on the south rim of the Grand Canyon? And that was Mary Colter.
Yeah, I thought I'd include this because she is such a prominent woman architect, and not only a woman architect, but a prominent architect, period.
Right.
And who has designed some very important buildings in our state. But also she, as a woman architect myself, she's just such a hero of mine. I recently heard something kind of disturbing, which was a theory that Mary Colter didn't really design these buildings, and that it was we've all been duped. It's like this conspiracy theory. But I was wondering if you've heard this, Marshall.
I have not heard that.
Okay.
Because even the folks up at La Posada, which I know they did a ton of research into Mary Colter and really brought that building back to life again from being an office building. And now it's one of the destinations.
Yeah.
If you're on a train or driving through Arizona to stop at La Posada.
Absolutely. I mean, I'm very skeptical of that theory that she didn't, and it kind of smacks a little bit of misogyny. because it was like, well, she didn't really do it. It was some male architect, So I don't really know. It's just something that it was very like disappointing to hear that, but I give no credence to it. I haven't really, looked into it, but
I would say if there was more information, yeah, I don't think I would jump to that conclusion because just, I mean, so many stories of people she's worked with and buildings she's done, and they were so true to what we know of her.
Right. Exactly.
I mean, really bringing in like that mission architecture, really looking at the landscape, the indigenous communities that were around, bringing in those other elements that nobody else was doing.
Right. Exactly. Yeah.
Especially it's like at that time, it would have been so hard for a woman architect. It would have been much easier for a man to be like, oh, that's my building, so that's why it's a good building. And people are like, oh, you did it. So yeah, so I don't, it's like I would need a lot more follow-up on the concept that she may not have designed those buildings.
Yeah, I totally agree, because it's just so easy to say that, I'm sure she encountered a lot of doubt at the time of like, oh no, you didn't really design this building, so, and like you said, it would have been so much easier for the man to take credit for it, whoever the man they supposedly said that actually designed the building. So it just seems very like a shaky theory. It doesn't make sense to me. So
I would agree with you until there's more proof or more proof in the pudding, as they say.
Agree.
Now, I'm not willing to taste any of that pudding.
No, me either. Agree. Mary Colter is awesome.
I agree. All right. Question 7. How tall are the doorways at Montezuma Castle? And they're only 5 foot high.
Yeah, you mentioned the shotgun windows at Haver's, in Ralph Haver's homes, and these are basically like the prehistoric version of that, which the Hohokam were, they were like, no, it wasn't the Hohokam, it was, I forgot the name of the peoples that lived there. I actually looked it up recently, but I forgot. But the reason they made them 5 feet was to keep the heat away, and also to keep the cold away at night. To be honest,
because heat rises, so it actually would have kept heat in.
Yeah, that's right, and to keep the cold out, especially at night. So remember these were just, they didn't have like doors to close, and it wasn't like there were any blinds or whatever, like they were just openings. And so again, this is another example of how people built for the desert, and how the buildings really reflect the needs of our climate. So I think that was really cool. I'm sure they had to sort of bend to get in, and I think people back then weren't as tall as people are today.
Right.
I think they didn't have to bend that much to get in. That's my theory. I think so.
So yeah, I mean they weren't as tall, but they probably had to bend over. I mean, I've seen some doors in some of the other indigenous ruins around where it's a really low door, so you actually would have to bend over to get in, and that was done for security. So that way, if you were coming in and they didn't want you in, they had a good chance to do some damage before you did.
I see, because you're in a compromised position when you're bending over, right? Like trying to get in. I see. That's so interesting. It's interesting how they designed these dwellings. It was a lot of thought was put into them.
Oh, and Peter brings up that there is a book called False Architect, the Mary Colter Hoax.
Yeah.
That claims that Mary Colter's career was greatly embellished.
Yeah, I heard about this book, so I'm like, I don't know about this. Does this person have any? Did they read this book?
He just said, "Hey, there's this book." So
okay, interesting.
Indeed. All right. So, who was the first Chinese American architect in Arizona? John Sing Tang. A. And he did some amazing buildings.
He did. He was a really very he was like a master mid-century modern architect that did a lot of like Googie style, really wacky, cool stuff. Like
Right. I mean, like Helsing's, which I mean, oh my gosh, I still wish we had that building because it's just so beautiful and kind of crazy. I mean, and so googie for the time period.
Yeah, right. Yeah, he was amazing. And again, like it was in the 1950s. There was a lot of discrimination back then. I'm sure he encountered a lot of obstacles and just discrimination in a very white male dominated profession. So he is also, a pioneer
Right.
in architecture, but he managed to be really like a master and a very famous mid-century modern architect that's done amazing buildings all over Phoenix. And there was one that I got to know a little bit better, which is the Chinese restaurant on Indian School and like 28th Street. Do you know the one I'm talking about? It has
Is that like Hong Kong?
yeah.
Or,
I don't know if it's called Hong
or
Kong.
China Village?
Yeah, China Village.
Oh.
It kind of has like this undulating like front, and then it has this big old like inverted arch.
Yeah.
In the back. It's super cool. It's a really neat building. So
Yeah.
Tang, he designed that, and we researched him a little bit, and he was sort of the go-to architect for the Chinese American community at the time, which makes sense. He was a prominent in general mid-century modern architect that a lot of people ended up hiring, at the end of the day. So it was to me, it's just neat to see the careers of like maybe minorities and women architects, like historically, and to see how they made their careers amazing.
Right. And so Peter does throw out that he read the first chapter and remained skeptical. But then I didn't realize, and Vera threw in that the Arizona Society did a Zoom meeting in January called I'll Take Credit for That, all about on Mary Colter. So I know, and I don't know, some of them, they've talked about putting those recordings up, and I don't know if indeed they have, but that would be interesting to go back and take a look and see kind of what they were able to reveal.
Yeah. Is there like a conclusion they came to that you know of?
I didn't know they had done that program, so I'll have to throw some notes out and say, hey, how do we get a chance to view that recording?
I would love to know what they discussed.
Yeah, no, I would too.
Yeah.
I mean, in this moment, so much is getting recorded and thrown out that it's like, I mean, just like you're saying, hey, here's something that may actually answer the question.
Yeah, exactly.
And then she also used to work at Helsing's back in the 70s.
Oh, yeah? That's awesome.
So I can only imagine what that must have been like. I would love to have I've never seen any photos of the inside of that building, which would have been fascinating. All right. So, and who was the architect of the first Christian church? And in case there was any doubt by looking at that building, it is Frank Lloyd Wright.
Yeah, and the reason I included that was I just think it's very cool that we have architecture in our midst that you don't have to travel too far away to go see, of like a world-class, world-famous, one of the most famous architects in the entire planet.
Right.
Right in our backyards, and this was his winter home and everything. So anyway, I think we're really lucky to have his buildings in our midst, and when if you go visit, you can look for his red, it's like he has a signature in his buildings where he leaves a signature, and which is like a red square. So look for that. And I think it's like near the entrance of this church.
Well, I also love that building. It's like I've never actually gone to a service there, but I love the fact that the pipe organ, the pipes go around the hall as opposed to just being on one side of the hall. So you would be able to hear the music almost like in this stereophonic kind of way.
Very cool. Yeah, that's awesome.
And so, yeah. And so it's great that it's also accessible.
Yeah, exactly. It's open a lot, and I think you can go in there and look.
It is. So, all right. So back in 1965, Willa proclaimed his Concrete Products magazine that Phoenix is the, and I didn't choose an answer here. Oops. So Phoenix is the
block.
That's exactly what I would have said, because I mean, of super light block, of so many houses being done here in that time period. We were in a building boom.
That's right. And super light, they basically invented the concrete masonry unit. This is called CMU, concrete masonry unit, which is something you see, everywhere these in Phoenix. And what I really like about the name Superlight is it has so many, it's just, it came from Superior, a lot of the volcanic scoria. So Superlight, and the perlite is made out of perlite. At least the original block was.
Right.
So Superior perlite, and then it's also Superlight because that block, the innovation of the block was that it was lighter than just like a straight up concrete block, because they used this sort of volcanic material in there that was lighter. Right. So it's super light as well. So it's like such a great name because it talks to a whole many layers of
right, exactly. The material it's made out of, where it came from, all in one nice hyphenated word.
Exactly. Whoever came up with that is a genius. So but yeah, Superlight. I'm also obsessed with Superlight block. I'm obsessed with Adobe and Superlight block, and I just love how it's a very homegrown material, and that how it just went crazy in the whole country. But I've lived and visited in a lot of places in the country, and really I do feel like Phoenix is the capital of Superlight block or of concrete block, because we just have so much of it here, and in other parts of the country they don't have it as much because it just doesn't make as much sense. It is a very desert material, made out of desert raw materials and things like that. So, but it's a great material that can be used other places as well. So yeah, it's an innovation we should be proud of, and we should own it. Like we did that.
I agree. And it's still, Superlight is still in production. You've got, and I know it's like they had offices all over the states because there was so much going on statewide that they made it easy to get access to.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah, it was really big. And you can see that when you just walk out your door.
Right. So many have those screens. That just kind of, those block screens that just kind of filter the light out.
Yeah. Yeah, they're wonderful. Those decorative blocks, from the 1950s and 60s are really gorgeous. Right. So yeah, they were fantastic. And you can see them in fencing and stuff, which is everywhere. It's pretty fantastic.
It is indeed. So let's see how people did. That's one of the questions I always like to ask is sometimes everyone's like, hey, I got them all right, or, oh, I only got a couple right. So I have a feeling I know some folks who did pretty well on this, but that's half the fun, because not necessarily that you did great, but if you retook that, if we did a post test, you would be much better in the post test with those answers, because now you've got a little idea of what's behind the story of some of those questions. Well, Taz, I want to say thank you so much for coming on and joining us as you helped us learn a little bit more about just Arizona architecture.
It's a pleasure. Go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, it was so much fun. Especially getting to hear about some of the names we don't necessarily get to hear about a lot.
Thank you. Yeah, it was really a lot of fun for me too. It's fun for me to put that together, and I really appreciate you inviting me. I love your show. It's fantastic. I'm going to tune in a lot more often. This is great. Thanks for doing this, Marshall. You're amazing.
Oh, indeed. And and it's every week. So
that's amazing. That's awesome.
All right, Taz. Well, have a great rest of your evening.
Thank you. You too.
And I will talk to you soon.
Okay. Bye-bye, everyone.
Oh, that was so much fun. Again, Taz, thank you so much for putting that all together for us. So you might have been thinking, initially, why should I click on that share button? Now here's, why you should click on that share button, because some of those answers you might not have known. And now all your friends, once we're able to gather around a cocktail party, we'll be able to share bits about Mary Colter. Maybe we can sit there and have a little debate on did she not? I am going to follow up with the Arizona Historical Society to see if we can get access to that show, because that would be pretty interesting to hear what they were able to piece together. So now we're coming up to Little Arizona. Now I know it's like, I moved here from New York, but before New York, I was living in Indiana in a little tiny farm town of 25 people surrounded by cornfields. And so spending a huge chunk of my life in a small town, and then moved to New York City, where there actually were more people on the floor of my apartment building than in the entire town I grew up in. That was very much culture shock, and I think the best way. But I always liked that small town kind of vibe, the characters. And so today we are going to talk a little bit about Young, Arizona. Now, Young, Arizona it's in Gila County, and it's about 120 miles kind of northeast of Phoenix. It has a population of just over 480 people. Now, Young, Arizona was founded in 1890. But, originally it was Pleasant Valley. And so they tried to actually get Pleasant Valley as the name of their post office, but that name had already been taken, so they couldn't assume that name. And so the postmaster at that time, her last name was Young, and so they indeed decided that they would name the town Young, Arizona. Now, it's basically surrounded by the Tonto National Forest. And as you can see, the ranger station there is 1919 and is on the Register of Historic Places. And if you stop there, you can find information about the indigenous folks that lived in the area and some of the ruins that are relatively close. I don't want to say very close, because not very close, but indeed, you can still find remnants of where indigenous folks lived there long before we all got here. Now, Young is really kind of the town that time forgot. They didn't get electricity until 1965. Cell phone service didn't even really become a thing that you could use there until the late 2000s. And progress in Pleasant Valley moves really slow. But, if you do go there, there are a variety of places you can eat, like Bruzy's Vineyard, where you can go have a glass of wine, a bite to eat, as well as say hello to the llamas that they have there. Now, they also hold in times, I know they canceled it last year. I haven't seen that they've officially canceled it, but in July, they do Pleasant Valley Days, which really kind of harkens back to that a lot of the town is indeed really old. And it's a chance to just kind of go and celebrate that and just that beauty, that splendor that is the Pleasant Valley. Now you can stop off at the Historical Society and Museum and learn a little bit about Young. Now, probably one of its most infamous or famous things about it is that it is tied to the Pleasant Valley Wars, which were basically a conflict that involved two feuding families, the Grahams and the Tewksburys, and it was kind of over an accusation of who stole some cattle. Because it wasn't really good farmland, so it was grazing land for sheep and cattle. And cattle rustling and was a thing that you could easily do. Now, we don't know how many folks actually passed away. We think it's like, I've been reading, it was about a dozen, maybe more, depending on the stories, because they're talking about how there's so much myth involved with the stories, as well as misinformation to try and steer people in a different direction. But it did probably ruin countless lives through suicide, mental issues, and even driving folks to drink. Now, if you do go to the Young Cemetery, you can find some of those folks that were involved with the Pleasant Valley Wars. It went from Tempe to Holbrook. And so that's an amazing slice of Arizona history. And Anita says there's also a really good restaurant, Antlers, that is there. So, my list of places to go once I feel comfortable travel is just skyrocketing. I so now want to go to Young. I can hardly wait till we can travel again and spend some time. Now, next week we have coming up, we have my friend Carol Poor on, and she's going to be talking about a project she works with, which is Phoenix Fabulous Mural History. And so we're going to talk about some of those murals that were painted by so many artists here, as well as some of the history that's involved. She also did a variety of storytelling events around the valley based on those murals. So it's going to be a really good show and all kinds of history. We're going to get drug up and talked about. Now, remember, a lot of my best information comes from all of you out there. So if you have any questions, stories, or suggestions, please throw me a note, and you can do that through email, Instagram, or even Facebook. And so we're actually doing this with the City of Phoenix, which is LGBTQ Storytelling Project. We did our first round last night. And so we've got one coming on Saturday. So if you know anyone who'd be interested, let them know that they can go to AZ Gay History on Facebook and look up more information about how they can share their stories with other folks as well. We do have our second Saturday tour coming up on April 10th. The one this month is sold out, but we only allow 10 people. So if you'd like to get some friends to go ahead and book now. I always want to give a shout out to, of course, Hannah for that lovely intro video, as well as my friends Cole and Chris, who did that promo video for myself with Cole writing the music and Chris doing the video. And of course, I always want to give a shout out to PJ Vader Barron, who creates so many amazing cocktails. And sometimes it's rather a challenge because I throw in, I think, probably some curveballs that he wasn't expecting. And so, but he steps up to the challenge and does some great things. We have outro music, which is going to be from Mr. Ho, a Sunny Slope boy who basically conducts his own orchestratica and shares that around the country with folks. And so, as well as some found film footage from Arizona in the 50s. So I want to say thank you all so much for joining us. Have a great Arizona day. night and a rest of your week. And I will see you back here, same bat time, same channels, unless you want to try a new channel. All right, everybody. Have an amazing evening.